Earth has nearly died before. Not once, not twice, but multiple times across its history. Entire oceans have collapsed. The atmosphere has turned toxic. Temperatures have risen so violently that forests disappeared across continents, while other extinctions froze the planet so severely that ecosystems simply stopped functioning. And the strangest part is that almost none of these worlds looked like modern Earth. Long before humans existed, before dinosaurs walked across the planet, before the first tree ever rose from the ground, Earth was already filled with alien oceans, strange creatures, and ecosystems unlike anything alive today. Then, over and over again, those worlds vanished. When people imagine extinction, they usually think about dinosaurs, a giant asteroid, a massive explosion, the end of prehistoric life. But the extinction that killed the dinosaurs was not the worst event Earth has ever experienced. Not even close. Because hundreds of millions of years before the asteroid impact, our planet went through disasters so severe that life itself nearly collapsed completely. And if evolution had unfolded even slightly differently afterward, intelligent life may never have appeared at all. To understand how fragile life on Earth really is, you have to travel back into worlds that no longer exist. Worlds buried beneath ancient stone, worlds where the continents looked unfamiliar, the oceans were filled with bizarre creatures, and survival depended entirely on whether the planet itself decided to remain stable. Around 444 million years ago, Earth looked almost silent compared to the modern world. The continents were mostly barren stretches of rock without forests, birds, mammals, or insects moving across the land. No grass covered the ground because grass had not evolved yet. No flowers existed. No trees moved in the wind. If you stood on the coastline of this ancient Earth, the silence would probably feel unnatural. Waves moved across empty shores beneath a sky no human would ever see. Almost everything alive existed beneath the oceans, and those oceans were filled with life. Warm, shallow seas stretched across huge regions of the planet beneath a dimmer sun than the one shining above Earth today. Trilobites crawled across the seafloor in enormous numbers, while primitive coral systems formed some of the earliest reef ecosystems in Earth's history. Brachiopods filtered nutrients from the water in dense underwater colonies. Strange squid-like predators drifted silently through darker waters, while eel-shaped creatures moved through currents carrying some of the earliest backbones evolution had ever produced. Primitive fish had already appeared by this time. Many had no jaws. Some were protected by natural armor made from thick, bony plates, while others drifted slowly through the water, feeding on microscopic organisms suspended in the sea. To modernize, the entire world would feel alien. Not just ancient, different. The oceans looked different, the atmosphere was different. Even the stars in the night sky would not appear exactly the same. And for millions of years, life continued expanding. Species evolved into new forms while ecosystems became increasingly connected and complex. The oceans were thriving with biodiversity long before complex life ever fully conquered land. Earth appeared stable, but planets can change very slowly until suddenly they don't. Far across the southern hemisphere, the giant supercontinent Gondwana slowly drifted toward Earth's south pole. At first, almost nothing happened. Temperatures cooled slightly, seasonal patterns shifted, ice began forming across higher elevations. Then the freezing accelerated. Massive glaciers spread outward across enormous regions of the continent, trapping unimaginable amounts of water inside expanding ice sheets. And as more water became locked away in ice, sea levels across the planet began falling. Slowly at first, then dramatically. Entire shallow seas started disappearing. And that was catastrophic because shallow coastal waters supported most life during this period of Earth's history. These environments were rich in sunlight, oxygen, and nutrients. Once they vanished, countless organisms suddenly lost the conditions they depended on to survive. Imagine entire ecosystems watching their world slowly drain away. Ancient reefs became exposed to open air. Coastal habitats collapsed. Food chains that had remained stable for millions of years suddenly began breaking apart piece by piece. Species adapted to warm, shallow waters faced colder temperatures and unstable ocean currents spreading across the planet. Creatures that had evolved over enormous stretches of time for one specific environment could not adapt fast enough once those conditions disappeared. Some organisms likely died where they lived. Others migrated into shrinking regions where conditions still remained survivable, but the safe regions kept shrinking, and Earth was only beginning. As glaciers continued expanding, the climate became increasingly unstable. Ocean circulation patterns shifted unpredictably, while temperatures changed across huge parts of the planet. Some scientists believe certain oceans may have become partially isolated from one another, disrupting the movement of nutrients and oxygen across marine ecosystems. The chemistry of the oceans itself may have started changing. changing. The planet was transforming, and life was trapped in the middle of it. Eventually, the freezing climate weakened, the glaciers began melting, sea levels rose again across the planet. But the returning oceans did not restore the old world. Instead, something even worse began happening beneath the surface. Ocean chemistry changed dramatically. As circulation patterns shifted and ecosystems struggled to recover, oxygen levels collapsed across many marine environments. Huge dead zones formed beneath the surface where life could barely survive. Imagine swimming through an ocean that slowly becomes impossible to breathe in. Entire regions of water may have turned dark and stagnant, while ecosystems that once thrived for millions of years began silently collapsing beneath the surface. Species that survived the freezing temperatures now faced suffocation. The extinction unfolded in waves, almost like the planet kept attacking life from different directions without giving ecosystems enough time to recover. Some species disappeared because their habitats vanished. Others died from collapsing temperatures. Others suffocated when oxygen disappeared from the water itself. And some scientists believe toxic metals released into the oceans may have poisoned marine ecosystems even further as environmental systems destabilized across the planet. Entire branches of Earth's evolutionary history ended permanently. Creatures that once dominated ancient oceans vanished forever, leaving behind only fossils buried beneath layers of stone. By the end of the extinction, around 85% of marine species had disappeared, and yet somehow, life endured. Small populations survived inside isolated environments scattered across the oceans. Over millions of years, those survivors slowly rebuilt ecosystems from the ruins of one of the first truly catastrophic extinction events in Earth's history. But Earth was not finished, not even close. Roughly 70 million years later, the planet was changing again. This time, Earth was becoming greener. The first true forests had begun spreading across the continents. Primitive trees rose above wetlands and river systems, while thick vegetation transformed landscapes that had once been mostly barren rock. For the first time in Earth's history, the land itself was starting to feel alive. Roots dug deep into stone and soil, breaking apart rock while reshaping entire river systems. Sediments moved differently across landscapes while oxygen levels slowly increased in the atmosphere. The planet was changing from the ground up, and while forests spread across land, the oceans were still filled with extraordinary life. Massive armored fish dominated ancient seas. Some looked like underwater tanks covered in thick protective plates, while others evolved into gigantic predators powerful enough to crush prey with terrifying force. One of the most famous was Dunkleosteus, a giant armored fish that may have reached lengths over 8 meters long. Instead of normal teeth, it possessed sharpened bony plates capable of slicing through prey with immense pressure. Scientists believe its bite force may have rivaled some of the strongest predators alive today. Imagine seeing something like that emerge from dark prehistoric water, a creature built less like a fish and more like a living machine. Meanwhile, coral reef systems stretched across tropical oceans in enormous underwater structures filled with biodiversity. Strange fish moved through ancient reefs while early sharks began appearing alongside countless marine organisms that no longer exist today. The Devonian oceans were crowded with experimentation. Evolution was trying everything. Some species developed stronger jaws. Others evolved new methods of swimming, hunting, or defending themselves. Life during the Devonian period seemed unstoppable. The oceans were thriving, the continents were turning green, evolution was accelerating, and that is exactly what made the next collapse so terrifying. As forests continued spreading across the continents, they unintentionally began altering Earth's chemistry itself. Roots broke apart rock and released nutrients into rivers. Those nutrients eventually flowed into the oceans, and that triggered enormous algae blooms across marine ecosystems. At first, the process probably seemed harmless, but when the algae eventually died, decomposition consumed huge amounts of oxygen from the surrounding water. Slowly, entire regions of the oceans began suffocating. Massive underwater dead zones spread through marine ecosystems where life had once thrived for millions of years. And unlike sudden asteroid impacts or giant explosions, this extinction unfolded slowly. Painfully slowly. Species survived one environmental collapse only to face another thousands of years later. Reef systems were among the first major casualties. Ancient coral structures that once supported enormous biodiversity began disappearing from the oceans. Then many of the giant armored fish followed. Food chains destabilized. Marine ecosystems that once seemed incredibly stable started unraveling piece by piece. Some scientists also believe falling carbon dioxide levels caused global cooling, further destabilizing climate systems across the planet. Others have proposed that damage to Earth's ozone layer may have increased harmful ultraviolet radiation reaching the surface. Even today, scientists still debate exactly how many environmental disasters overlap during this extinction, and that uncertainty makes it even more unsettling, because it suggests Earth's systems were failing simultaneously. The oceans were changing, the climate was changing, atmospheric chemistry was changing, the planet itself was becoming unstable, and life had no way to stop it, because life itself may have accidentally triggered the catastrophe. The expansion of forests, one of the greatest evolutionary achievements Earth had ever seen, may also have destabilized the planet enough to help drive mass extinction. Earth's ecosystems had become deeply interconnected. Small environmental changes in one part of the world created devastating consequences somewhere else entirely, and over millions of years, around 75% of species disappeared. But hidden among the survivors were small vertebrates adapting to shallow wetlands and muddy coastlines. Some had begun developing primitive lungs. Others evolved stronger fins capable of pushing through shallow environments. At first, these adaptations were probably meant for survival in unstable habitats where oxygen levels constantly changed. But evolution rarely plans ahead. Those same adaptations would eventually allow certain species to move farther onto land than ever before. Without realizing it, these distant survivors were preparing for one of the biggest evolutionary transitions Earth would ever witness. Life was slowly preparing to conquer land. But before that future could fully arrive, Earth was heading towards something far worse than anything it had experienced before. Around 252 million years ago, Earth entered the deadliest extinction event in the history of complex life. Even today, scientists call it the Great Dying, and honestly, the name barely captures how catastrophic it really was. Before the extinction began, life had become incredibly diverse across both land and sea. Vast forests stretched across enormous continents, while strange reptile-like creatures wandered through swamps, deserts, and floodplains. Giant insects filled humid skies rich in oxygen. Some dragonfly relatives grew with wingspans larger than modern birds. Meanwhile, the oceans were crowded with ancient marine life that had evolved over hundreds of millions of years. Reef systems flourished beneath warm, shallow seas, while predators hunted through ecosystems that had remained stable for ages. Earth seemed full of life everywhere. Then the planet itself turned hostile. In what is now Siberia, colossal volcanic eruptions burst through Earth's crust on a scale almost impossible to imagine. These eruptions were not ordinary volcanic explosions lasting days or years. They continued for hundreds of thousands of years, possibly longer. Lava flooded across enormous regions in layers sometimes kilometers thick. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath molten rock, while toxic gases poured endlessly into the atmosphere. Today, these eruptions are known as the Siberian traps, and they may have nearly ended complex life on Earth. To understand the scale of these eruptions, imagine entire countries buried beneath lava flows stretching farther than the eye could see. Rivers of molten rock carved through ancient ecosystems while the ground itself split apart beneath the pressure rising from deep inside the planet. The sky may have glowed orange for generations. Forests burned, ash spread across enormous distances, and the atmosphere slowly began changing. The eruptions released unimaginable amounts of carbon dioxide into the air, triggering intense greenhouse warming across the planet. Temperatures rose dramatically while climate systems spiraled out of control. Rainfall patterns shifted violently. Some regions experienced devastating drought while others faced extreme flooding, but the oceans suffered even worse. As seawater absorbed increasing amounts of carbon dioxide, it became more acidic. Oxygen levels collapsed across marine ecosystems while massive toxic regions spread beneath the surface. Entire food chains vanished. Marine species that had dominated Earth's oceans for millions of years disappeared almost entirely. Coral reefs collapsed. Predators vanished. Scavengers vanished. Whole branches of evolution simply ended, and somehow conditions continued getting worse. Some scientists believe the volcanic activity ignited underground coal deposits and methane-rich sediments, releasing even more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Others believe warming oceans triggered massive methane releases from the seafloor itself. The extinction became a chain reaction, one disaster triggering another, then another, then another.